The issues between Shia and Sunni Muslims go back to the 7th century and the death of the Prophet Muhammad. In the past decade, there has been a ton of spotlight on the differences between these two branches of Islam. According to a 2009 study by the Pew Research Center, the vast majority of the 1.8 billion Muslims who are in the world are Sunni. But let's take a look at some of these differences between Shia and Sunni Muslims. First of all, let's talk about the split, if you will. Now, when the Prophet Muhammad died in the year 632, he didn't leave a successor to lead the Muslim community. So there was a lot of dispute as to who would lead them from then on. The title passed to Abu Bakr, and then after him came Ali, the Prophet's son-in-law. But after Ali, his sons Hassan and then Hussein claimed the title. Hussein's martyrdom became a central focal point to those who believed that Ali should have succeeded the Prophet and not Abu Bakr. But Sunnis also believe that the first 3 caliphs before Ali as rightly guided and as devoted to Allah. Sunni rulers embarked on a massive conquest that extended the caliphate to northern Africa and Europe. Now I want to take a bit of a closer look in terms of how their beliefs actually differ. So Shias considered Ali and the leaders who came after him as imams. Most believe in a line of 12 imams, the last of whom, a boy, is believed to have vanished in the 9th century in Iraq. Shias known as Twelvers anticipate his return as the Mahdi or the Messiah. Sunnis emphasize God's power in the material world, while Shias value martyrdom and sacrifice. Now, despite these differences in opinions and practices, Shia and Sunni Muslims share the main beliefs of Islam and are considered by most to be brothers. That's why you don't hear anyone calling themselves Shia Muslim or Sunni Muslim. They're simply Muslim. So just want to clear that up before I continue this episode. So now let's talk about a little bit of where they're located around the world. Now, more than 85% of the world's 1.8 billion Muslims are Sunni. They live across the Arab world, as well as in countries such as Turkey, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Iran and Iraq and Bahrain are largely Shia. The Saudi royal family practices a conservative brand of Sunni Islam known as Wahhabism. Now, in terms of their religious leadership, so Shia Muslims believe that the Imam is pure by nature and that his authority is unquestionable because it comes directly from God. Therefore, Shia Muslims often venerate their Imams as saints. On the other hand, Sunni Muslims say that there is no basis in Islam for a hereditary privileged class of spiritual leaders, and no basis at all for the veneration of saints. Sunni Muslims argue that the leadership of the community is not a birthright, but it's actually a trust that you need to earn. So, Sunni and Shia Muslims follow the Quran, as well as the Prophet's hadiths or sayings, and the Sunnah, which are the customs. They also adhere to the 5 pillars of Islam. Now, in countries ruled by Sunnis, the Shias tend to be among the poorest of the population. They would often see themselves as being victims of discrimination and some form of oppression. But on the other hand, Sunni extremists often denounce Shia as heretics. But I'm not going to dive too much into that because it's a lot of opinions and speculation of what's really considered oppression and all that stuff. And I'm just going to leave that for people that want to debate that. But I want to move on now into a huge distinction, the Muharram as well as self-flagellation. So Muharram is the first month in the Islamic calendar, right? And the 10th day of Muharram is a day of Ashura. Now on the day of Ashura, some Shia Muslims march in parades across the streets and flog their own backs with whips or chains. This is to celebrate Hussein and his martyrdom. While this practice is permitted by some Muslims, the Shia community has completely banned this practice. Another distinct belief is their belief in angels. So Shias believe that angels were created by God and they obey God's commands. They have limited free will, but they also have no desire to commit sins. And the Sunnis, on the other hand, believe that God created angels from light, and they believe that they do not have any free will whatsoever, and they always obey God's commands. Shias believe in taqiyya, which is to be able to deny faith under grave danger. So like if somebody's holding a gun to your head and they're saying denounce your faith, it's like, okay, yep, denounce your faith and you're not breaking anything in Islam. Now this extends to the belief that the true meaning of faith is hidden until the coming of the 12th Imam. So the Sunnis don't really place as much importance to the inner meaning of the Quran. They accept that there is an inner meaning, yes, sure, but they stress more on the literal meanings rather than subjective interpretation. And now for the hadiths, right? So the hadiths are collections of reports regarding Muhammad's teachings and life. Though the Quran takes precedence over the hadiths, these texts are often used in Islamic law, especially to settle disputes. Shia Islam rejects Sunni Islam's Katub al-Sitta, or the 5 allegedly original hadiths. It also rejects hadiths attributed to Muhammad's wife Aisha. Likewise, Sunni Muslims reject Shia Islam's 4 books. Starting with number 10, counting down to number 1. We have the one true faith. Islam for both Sunnis and Shias is considered the one true faith. For Muslims, Islam is more than just a belief. It's a way of life, or rather the way of life. Of course, this belief of being the one true faith has been the source of a lot of struggle between Muslims and those of other faiths, but Sunnis and Shias do stand united in the belief that Islam is the only way. So the next similarity I'm taking a look at is the belief in one God. Sunni and Shias are fully monotheistic, and monotheistic in simpler terms literally just means that they believe in only one God, Allah. While some denominations of Christianity, for example, they take a look at their prophet Jesus and put him as equal with God, and of course include him in the Godhead or the Trinity, doctrines like that. But Muslims regard their prophet Muhammad as just someone who was inspired by God, but he was still just a human. Sunnis and Shias believe their belief of monotheism is the correct belief because there is only just one God, and there doesn't leave any room for any doctrines like the Trinity, where 3 is considered 1, or the beliefs like in Hinduism, for example, where a supreme being is identified, yes, but the being can be worshipped through various manifestations of different gods or goddesses. Islam doesn't have anything to do with that. It's just, nope, one God, period. That's it. That's all you gotta know. The next similarity is the Quran. So the Quran is a holy text of both Sunnis and Shias. Both of them accept the Quran, sometimes spelled Quran with a K. They believe the Quran is the holy book, and that it contains the indisputable will of Allah and his plans for humanity. Both Sunnis and Shias believe that the Quranic laws called Sharia supersedes worldly laws of the land. The next similarity I'm taking a look at is the 5 pillars of Islam. Even if you're not a Muslim, you've probably heard the term before, but this is another similarity between them. The pillars of Islam form the foundation of the faith for both Shias and Sunni Muslims. Sunni and Shia Muslims accept and practice the 5 pillars of Islam, and these 5 core acts are considered essential to what it means to actually live out the Islamic faith. The 5 pillars are summarized as follows: the declaration of the belief in Allah as the one true God and his last prophet, Muhammad. Second is daily prayers. Third is charitable deeds and giving to the less fortunate. Fourth is fasting during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. And 5 is taking a pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in your lifetime, as long as you can afford it and are physically able to do so. Next similarity is the use of images. So the Arabic calligraphy is a stylized and very fascinating form of decor. Calligraphy is very different because any depiction of the human form, especially of the prophets of Islam, are viewed as idolatry by both Sunnis and Shias, which is considered a sin. In the art and architecture of Sunni and Shia, you will not find any representations of Allah or the Prophet Muhammad, as you might expect to find artwork of gods in Hindu temples. Instead, both Sunnis and Shias decorate their mosque with patterns and shapes and quotes in Arabic calligraphy. So those are 5 of the main similarities. Now I want to transition over and move on to 5 of the main differences. So let's take a look.
The Shia-Sunni divide is a political and religious divide around who was the rightful heir after the passing of the Prophet Muhammad in early Islam.
The first difference to take a look at is the leadership and name. So the division between Shia and Sunni dates all the way back to the passing of the Prophet Muhammad in the year 632. This raised the big question of who is going to take over the leadership of the Muslim nation. Sunnis make up the largest branch of Islam, and the word Sunni in Arabic comes from the word meaning one who follows the traditions of the Prophet. Sunni Muslims agree that the new leader should be elected among those that are capable to carry out the job. Abu Bakr, a friend and advisor of the Prophet Muhammad, became the first caliph, which is a successor or deputy of the Prophet of the Islamic nation. Shia Muslims, they believe that following the Prophet Muhammad, leadership should have passed directly to his cousin and son-in-law, Ali bin Abu Talib, and Shia Muslims do not recognize the authority of elected Muslim leaders, choosing instead to follow a line of imams which they believe have been appointed by the Prophet Muhammad or by God himself. The word Shia in Arabic means a group or supportive party of people.
About 85% are Sunni and 15% are Shia. This is a conflict of identity far more than it is a conflict of belief and practice. People actually do feel this divide deeply.
So the next difference is the location. Sunni Muslims make up an 85% majority of the Muslims from all around the world. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Yemen, Pakistan, Indonesia, Turkey, Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia are predominantly Sunni. Large populations of Shia Muslims can be found in Iran and Iraq. Large Shia minority communities can also be found in countries like Yemen, Bahrain, Syria, and Lebanon. The religious differences are embedded in the culture that in these places where large Sunni and Shia groups live together, coexisting is very challenging, almost impossible to happen.
Sunnis and Shias is one big family that need to forget this 1,000-year-old division and look at the problems that we face now.
The next difference is temporary marriages. So this is a big one. Nikah muta, or temporary marriage, is an ancient Islamic practice that usually happens when a man has to travel far distances. The term literally translates to pleasure marriage, and it basically unites a man and a woman as husband and wife, but only for a predetermined and temporary amount of time, and there's some other rules that apply as well. Shias still believe and honor this practice. Sunnis, however, view it as complete adultery, which is a sin. There's also a difference in the religious leadership, so I touched on it briefly, but there are varying beliefs about this. But in a very general sense, Shia Muslims believe that the authority of the Imam is infallible because it comes directly from God. They perform pilgrimages to their tombs and shrines in hopes of divine intercession. Sunni Muslims completely counter this belief because they believe that there is no basis in Islam for a privileged group of spiritual leaders based on heredity. And also, they don't believe that there's any basis for intercession of saints. Sunnis say that leadership of the Muslim community is not a birthright, but rather something that is earned through trust and may be given or taken away by the people. And the final difference that I'm taking a look at is the difference in religious texts and practices. Shia Muslims tend to feel animosity towards some of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad. This is based on their position and actions during the early years of discord about leadership in the community. Many of those companions, Abu Bakr, Umar bin al-Khattab, Aisha, and several others, have narrated traditions about the Prophet's life and spiritual practice. Shia Muslims reject these traditions and do not base any of their religious practices on those testimonies of those individuals. This naturally gives rise to some differences in religious practice between the two groups. These differences touch all aspects of the religion, including prayer, fasting, pilgrimage, etc.
Muslims now need to be united more than at any time. In order to be united, we need to forget these old hurts and we need to look at the reality of the present situation. The reality of the present situation is that Sunnis and Shias use the same Quran.
Starting at difference number 10, and that is the Prophet Muhammad's successor. This is considered to be the dominant difference between Shia and Sunni Muslims. In Shia Islam, they hold that Ali ibn Abu Talib is the appointed successor to the Islamic Prophet Muhammad, and he's the head of the Muslim community. However, Sunni Muslims hold on to the belief that Abu Bakr was actually the first Muslim leader after the Prophet Muhammad based on election. The difference at number 9 is the difference in the afterlife philosophies. There's a whole lot to say about this, but let's try to keep it as simple as possible. Both Sunnis and Shiites believe that in the afterlife, there's either paradise or hell. Now, the split comes when deciding on how somebody actually gets to heaven or hell. For Shias, if one believes and follows the Prophet Muhammad as well as the 12 Imams, then paradise is guaranteed for them. However, Sunni Muslims believe that they must have faith in Allah, His prophets, believe in the righteous deeds presented in the entire Quran, as well as accept Muhammad as the final prophet in order to have a chance at attaining paradise. But even if you do all of the above, you're still dependent on the mercy of Allah. Let's talk about self-flagellation. This is a big one. So Sunnis disagree with the practice of self-flagellation so much that they view it as a sin, like a big sin. They do not even participate in the act in any capacity, in any way, shape, or form. Now, over to the Shias, they practice self-flagellation to commemorate the martyrdom of Hussein. And these acts, they consist of flogging your own back, hitting your chest with your hands, or using knife or chains or other sharp objects. Now, we're not going to show images because some of them get very graphic, but as you can imagine, this practice can be very painful for someone to experience. The difference at number 7 is the worship at graves. Sunnis strongly oppose the idea of praying at grave sites, and it's viewed as shirk or a major sin because they're relying on someone other than Allah for their help. Shias, on the other hand, they are totally fine with the practice and they actually encourage it. There are some varying beliefs about this though, but touching or kissing the shrines of the prophets and the imams, they believe that it does not imply shirk according to their beliefs, nor does it associate that this particular person is equal with Allah, because Allah has the ultimate sovereignty in this entire universe, and Muslims submit to and worship and seek the help from Him only. But Shias maintain the idea that visiting shrines is merely a gesture of respect. They're not actually asking for help from those individuals who passed away. Now let's look at the difference at number 6 when it comes to choosing a leader. When it comes to choosing a leader, Shia and Sunni Muslims have completely different views. Shias believe that the doctrine of an imam is perfect because it comes directly from God, and that the leader of the Muslim community must be a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. Sunnis, on the other hand, don't believe that there is any basis in Islam to have spiritual leaders that are admired or being held in such a regard like this as a leader of a Muslim community. Also, Sunnis believe that leadership shouldn't be a birthright, but it should be a trust that is earned and which may be given or taken away by the people themselves through voting and election. Okay, so let's jump back into this episode. Difference at number 5. And this difference has to do with Al-Mahdi. Although the concept of Al-Mahdi is not an essential doctrine in Sunni Islam, it is popular among both Sunni and Shia Muslims. Both groups agree that he will rule over Muslims and establish justice. However, they differ when it comes to his attributes and his status. Sunni Muslims, generally speaking, do not believe that Mahdi has already been born. Sunnis in general reject the 12-verse Shiite principle. The Mahdi is the 12th and the last in a chain of the purified Imams. He was born on the 15th of Shaban, 255 AH. His name is Muhammad and his titles are Mahdi among others, and his birth was kept a complete secret. And Shias believe that the 12th Imam, yes, will return as the Mahdi with a company of his chosen ones, and his enemies will be led by the Dajjal, or the false Messiah. The next difference we're looking at number 4 is temporary marriage. Temporary marriage is an ancient Islamic practice that usually happened when a man had to travel far distances. And pretty much what these marriages do is it unites a man and a woman as husband and wife, but only for a predetermined and temporary amount of time. Certain Shias still hold on to this practice. However, Sunnis, they view this as adultery. So if you're married and you leave without a divorce, That's adultery, that's a sin. The difference at number 3 leads us to holy cities. Both Sunnis and Shias have 3 common holy cities, which are Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem. The only difference though is that Shias also believe that Najaf, Karbala, and Kufa are holy cities as well. Now, an important practice of Shia Islam is that of visiting the shrines of Imams in Iraq and also in Iran. In Iraq, these include the tomb of Imam Ali and also visiting the tomb of his son Imam Hussein, because both are considered to be major Shia martyrs. The difference at number 2 has to deal with angels and their free will. Both Sunnis and Shias, they believe in angels, that God created them from light and they carry out his will. They're powerful creatures and everything. However, angels lead very different lives when it comes to Shia and Sunnis. Okay, so for Shias, they believe that angels obey God's commandments, but they are granted the option to disobey. But with this belief though, Shias believe angels have no desire to sin, so they remain faithful regardless, but they do have the option to sin if they choose to. Sunnis, though, they feel that angels always obey God's commandments, and that's because that they have no free will at all. So even the potential or the possibility to sin and stray from God isn't even there for angels. So as you can see, that would be a completely different lifestyle when it comes to the angelic beings based on the beliefs of Shia and Sunni Muslims. And finally, we end off with a difference at number 1, and this is the difference in praying. Sunni Muslims, they pray 5 times a day. This is known by everybody, even people that aren't Muslim. Whereas Shia Muslims, they can combine prayers and pray 3 times a day. And one of the things that you can use to identify a Shia praying is that you'll often see a small tablet of clay from a holy place, often from Karbala or a place like that. And on that thing, they place their forehead on it while they're bowing down in prayer. Now for Sunnis, Sunnis have their arms folded in various positions, from below the navel to the chest, right over the left. But Shias keep their arms straight by their sides.